The best fighters in history, a distinction reserved for a select few, chosen athletes touched by a magic wand who, thanks to talent and hard work, have climbed to the very top of the Olympus of sports. From the lightest weight categories to the heaviest, thousands and thousands of fighters have stepped into the UFC octagon at some point, but only one can claim to be the greatest of all time in their division. In this video, we will look at the best fighter in history for each UFC division, so without further ado, give the video a like if you enjoy it. It helps me a lot. Flyweight. Let's begin with flyweight Demetrious Johnson. If this fighter is not considered the greatest of all time, it is solely and exclusively because of his small size. Fighters in the flyweight category will always struggle to captivate a large audience due to the very nature of a sport where incredible KO clips will always be more acclaimed than a display of dominance and superiority over 5 rounds. After a somewhat hesitant start in the company, where he achieved 2 victories in his first 4 fights, the fighter nicknamed Mighty Mouse decided to roll up his sleeves and get to work on what would become one of the most iconic winning streaks in UFC history. From 2012, when he became the champion, Demetrious steamrolled through all opposition placed in front of him for 5 years, during which he accumulated an astounding 11 consecutive title defenses. To give you an idea of how incredible that feat is, consider that the current champion with the most title defenses is Islam Makhachev, who has 3 defenses. So to match Demetrious Johnson's record, he would need to add 8 more title defenses. There hasn't been a more complete fighter than Mighty Mouse. From submissions that can't even be replicated in UFC 5, to hands that left opponents unconscious, to knees that finished Olympic champions in the first round, and 5-round exhibitions to completely dominate a fight, UFC didn't even know who to put in front of him anymore since he had literally wiped out all possible challengers. After half a decade, Henry Cejudo managed to be the man who finally dethroned Demetrious in an incredibly close fight. That was, in fact, his last match in the UFC. After a somewhat turbulent relationship with the company for not delivering the pay-per-view numbers the UFC expects from a champion, the American ultimately decided to leave the organization where he had become an eternal legend. Years will pass, and we will see great champions in this division who will captivate fans of the sport. However, it is very difficult to imagine that any of them could ever claim the throne in this category. Demetrious Johnson left a unique and unrepeatable legacy that will likely never be fully recognized. However, every time the debate about the greatest mixed martial arts fighters in history arises, this man should always be mentioned by everyone. Bantamweight. In this category, there is no unanimously agreed GOAT, greatest of all time, that everyone believes is the best. The window of opportunity is still open for current bantamweights to claim this position in the coming years. However, to this day, Dominick Cruz is, in my humble opinion, the most important bantamweight fighter the UFC has seen so far. Unfortunately, severe injuries sidelined Cruz during the prime of his career. In 2011, as champion, he suffered a knee injury and multiple setbacks, keeping him out of the octagon until 2014. Ranked 10th upon his return, he admitted that the 3 years away from the sport led to depression, but he came back strong, winning his return fight in the first round. After another long injury layoff, Cruz finally reclaimed his belt in 2016 by defeating TJ Dillashaw. Despite being the underdog, he remains the bantamweight with the most title defenses, achieving 4 during his reign, even with years of interruptions. Cruz's 9-year undefeated streak and 13 consecutive victories ended with a loss to Cody Garbrandt. Despite the setbacks, Cruz's story is one of perseverance, cementing him as the greatest bantamweight of all time. Featherweight. This division sparks a lot of debate among fans. The 2 main contenders for the GOAT title are Jose Aldo and Alexander Volkanovski. Let's explore arguments for both, and I'll share my personal opinion at the end. Jose Aldo was undefeated for 10 years, amassing 18 consecutive victories, most in WEC and later in the UFC. Before joining the UFC, Aldo built his reputation in WEC with relentless finishes, earning the title by defeating Mike Brown in 2009. In the UFC, after the WEC merger, Aldo was crowned featherweight champion, starting a reign unmatched to this day. He defended the belt 7 times against elite opponents like Kenny Florian, Chad Mendes, Frankie Edgar, and the Korean Zombie. Aldo was a feared striker with legendary takedown defense. However, in 2015, his dominance ended abruptly when Conor McGregor knocked him out in 13 seconds, tarnishing his legacy in the eyes of casual fans. Despite this, Aldo regained the interim title against Frankie Edgar and was reinstated as undisputed champion when McGregor vacated the belt. However, his later defeats to Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski marked the decline of his career. Despite this, Aldo remains a key figure in MMA history, helping globalize the sport and leaving a lasting legacy. Volkanovski began his UFC journey with a strong desire to prove himself. His striking, combined with exceptional grappling and defense, led him to dominate legends like Jose Aldo and Max Holloway, the latter on 3 occasions. Volkanovski showcased incredible resilience, escaping tight submissions from Brian Ortega and standing toe-to-toe with Islam Makhachev in his attempt to become a double champion. His fight IQ and dominance were evident in his defenses, where he even checked on his opponents mid-fight due to the sheer punishment he was delivering. Though Volkanovski has 5 title defenses compared to Aldo's 7, his well-rounded skill set and dominance over elite competition make him a strong contender for featherweight GOAT. Choosing between Aldo and Volkanovski is challenging. While Aldo paved the way for the sport's growth, Volkanovski's era of dominance has been incredible to witness. Personally, I lean toward Volkanovski, likely because I followed his reign more closely, but both deserve immense respect as legends of the featherweight division. Lightweight. For over a decade, the lightweight division has been the deepest and most competitive in the UFC. With so many elite fighters, you'd expect fierce competition for the GOAT title. Yet, one man stands apart. In one of the world's most brutal sports, Khabib Nurmagomedov never spilled a drop of blood in the octagon. With a perfect 29-0 record, Khabib is arguably the greatest grappler in UFC history. His relentless pressure and unmatched wrestling overwhelmed every opponent. He still holds the record for the most takedowns in a single fight. Each time he entered the octagon, he seemed even more dominant. After winning the lightweight belt, Khabib defended it 3 times, finishing elite fighters with increasing speed and efficiency. He defeated Conor McGregor in the 4th round, submitted Dustin Poirier in the 3rd, and finished Justin Gaethje in the 2nd. In 2020, Khabib's career came to a sudden end following the loss of his father, mentor, and coach. He promised his mother that his fight against Gaethje would be his last, and he retired at age 32. At the time, he was more dominant than ever, leaving many to wonder how many more defenses he could have achieved. Beyond the octagon, Khabib's impact is profound. He's an icon who has inspired a new generation of fighters, especially in Dagestan. His humility and respect set a new standard of professionalism in MMA. Can anyone retire undefeated, having lost just 1 round and never bled in the cage? Khabib set a standard of excellence so high that it seems almost impossible for anyone to match. Welterweight. It couldn't be anyone else. Georges St. Pierre's incredible record of 26 wins and just 2 losses speaks for itself. Early in his career, he lost to his idol Matt Hughes, but used the defeat to improve, eventually avenging it. His second and final loss to Matt Serra was also short-lived, as GSP reclaimed his belt in dominant fashion and never looked back. From there, he went on a historic run, defending the welterweight title 9 times against top contenders like BJ Penn, Josh Koscheck, Carlos Condit, and Nick Diaz. His unmatched athleticism, discipline, and ability to dominate on the ground made him one of the sport's greatest. He remains the UFC's all-time leader in takedowns with 90. Outside the octagon, GSP was a model of professionalism and respect. Though he admitted he didn't enjoy fighting, he saw it as a means to live the life he wanted. In 2013, after his 9th title defense, a controversial win against Johnny Hendricks, GSP shocked the world by stepping away from the sport. 4 years later, he returned, moving up to middleweight to submit Michael Bisping and become a 2-division champion. GSP retired at the top, leaving a legacy as one of the greatest fighters in MMA history. Middleweight. Anderson Silva was a fighter who could create highlights like his high kick against Vitor Belfort or his legendary submission of Chael Sonnen. These moments were just a fraction of the dominance Silva displayed during his reign as middleweight champion. defending his title an incredible 10 times. From his UFC debut in 2006, where he treated his opponent like an amateur, Silva quickly became the division's king and held the title for over 6 years, a record-breaking 2,457 days. To put it in perspective, a current champion would need to hold their belt until 2030 to match his reign. Known as one of the most versatile and feared strikers in UFC history, Silva also held a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which helped him extend his dominance. His 16-fight winning streak remains the longest in UFC history. Silva's superiority often led him to toy with opponents, leaving rivals frustrated and fans in awe of his skill. However, his dominance eventually backfired. After 16 straight wins, Silva was knocked out by Chris Weidman. In their rematch, promising no more games, Silva suffered a devastating leg injury, marking the end of his prime. Though he lost 7 of his final 9 UFC fights, Silva's legacy as one of MMA's greatest remains intact. His flair and skill made him a legend, helping to globalize a sport that now captivates millions. Light heavyweight.
Jan Blachowicz refractor. Ooh, John Jones.
That's badass. That is fucking badass. Look at that card.
That's a very special card.
John Jones is considered the most complete fighter in MMA history. Alongside Khabib Nurmagomedov, he's one of the few athletes to remain undefeated in competition. That single loss on his record, a disqualification for illegal elbows. In 16 years with the UFC, no one has managed to defeat him in the octagon. Fighting John Jones is a nightmare. His highlight reels feel like scenes from a movie. He's won fights in every imaginable way, showcasing natural talent like no other, often compared to Michael Jordan or Lionel Messi. Starting with a Greco-Roman wrestling base, Jones began training MMA in January 2008, made his professional debut 3 months later, and by August of the same year, he was already fighting in the UFC. Jones holds numerous records, 15 championship fight wins, the most in history. At just 23, he became the youngest UFC champion. He has defeated 8 former champions, including legends like Daniel Cormier, Lyoto Machida, Shogun Rua, and Glover Teixeira. Remarkably, he's excelled as both the best striker and grappler simultaneously. However, Jones's career has been marred by scandals. His out-of-competition controversies and suspensions, totaling 2 years, prevented him from achieving even greater heights. Ultimately, the only person who's been able to stop John Jones is himself. After 11 title defenses and performances that, while less spectacular, were always enough to retain his title, Jones left the light heavyweight division after a decade of dominance. He spent 3 years preparing to move up to heavyweight. Unsurprisingly, John Jones became the heavyweight champion, defeating Cyril Gane in just 2 minutes. John Jones stands as MMA's eternal GOAT, cementing his place in the sport's Olympus forever. I have a video dedicated to John Jones. Here's the link if you want to know the full story. Don't miss it. Heavyweight. This division has seen some of the toughest fighters on the planet, and many heavyweights could argue their spot in this video, but none have achieved what Stipe Miocic has in the UFC. With 3 consecutive title defenses and 4 in total, no other fighter in this category has ever done it. When you think of a heavyweight, you might imagine a different type of athlete, larger, bulkier, with a troubled past that led them to the sport. But Stipe is a regular guy who, alongside dominating the toughest division, also works as a firefighter in his city. However, once this humble fireman steps into the cage, he is capable of crushing the most fearsome and gigantic monsters. Stipe is exceptionally skilled for his size, with incredible boxing that has helped him reach the top of the sport. Instead of relying on a single powerful strike to knock out his opponent, Miocic has taken striking technique to the next level. His wrestling base has also proven invaluable when needed, as sometimes it's smarter to take the fight to the ground when your opponent is too dangerous to exchange blows with. This fight IQ is another of his strong points. The ability to adapt to a plan B to win a fight he's losing is something not all fighters can successfully execute. It's hard to find a UFC fan who doesn't respect and admire Stipe, but at the same time, he was never truly recognized for being the incredible fighter he was in his prime. Perhaps this was due to his lack of interest in the spectacle surrounding show business, focusing instead on his firefighting career and family life. But the numbers speak for themselves, and it seems it will be a long time before another heavyweight comes close to the achievements of Stipe Miocic as UFC heavyweight champion. And that's it. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more content, and see you in the next video. Goodbye.
Any Portuguese?
I eat, I sleepy, and I trainy.